Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Even though the CPP has been making money, Alberta's finance minister says our province is still investigating the possibility of an Alberta-made pension plan. Alberta wildfire officials have an update on the massive blaze which has been threatening the city of Fort McMurray. And here in Lethbridge, staff and students at St. Martha's School got a chance to experience a very special powwow.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government announced that there will be new funding to help support us as we get older. Officials say they signed a 5-year, $627 million bilateral funding agreement with the federal government. The funds will support home care and continuing care home initiatives. Now, in a release statement, Health Minister Adriana LaGrange had this to say: "This transformational work will provide Albertans high-quality care close to home and will build a responsive and sustainable continuing care system for years to come." Alberta's finance minister says positive returns reported by Canada's biggest pension fund will not alter his government's stance that a provincial plan is worth exploring. The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board says it earned an 8% return last year. Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has asked the chief actuary to provide an estimate on how much Alberta would be owed if it left the CPP. Finance Minister Nate Horner says they are still waiting for a number and will gauge public interest once it arrives. Alberta fire officials say thanks to the cooler, wet weather much of the province has been experiencing, the wildfire danger has decreased. That includes the Wood Buffalo district near Fort McMurray, where a previously out-of-control wildfire is now being held.
Changes to wildfire danger have also allowed us to lift and amend a number of restrictions and bans that were put in place while the wildfire was still out of control. The fire ban in the southern part of the Fort McMurray forest area has been lowered to a fire advisory, and the off-highway vehicle restriction has also been lifted. A fire ban remains in effect in the northern section of the Fort McMurray forest area, and a fire advisory is in effect in the high-level forest area. While current wildfire danger, area burned, and the number of active wildfires are encouraging, it's important to remember that conditions can change very quickly in Alberta, leading to heightened wildfire danger and activity. Alberta's government will continue to proactively respond to changes in wildfire risk level as the season progresses.
Officials say since January the 1st, there have been 358 wildfires recorded in the forest protection area that have burned over 28,500 hectares. So far, 346 fires have been extinguished. Alberta currently has 30 active wildfires, including 20, which have carried over from last year. So what does all of this recent moisture mean for our farmers, especially here in southern Alberta? David Bishop farms out by Barron's, and he's also the Region 1 Director at Alberta Grains. He says all of the rain we've been receiving lately has been a real blessing for those in our agricultural sector.
It's something we haven't seen for a few years, so it's really, really good to see some moisture. And as the saying goes, as farmers, we say, rain makes grain, and we've had some nice rains already this spring, so it's a great start to the year. We're having good starts. The crop will come out of the ground really well, but we'll need some more rains later. We're not sitting where we can say we can't not get a crop, because we're going to get a crop, but to have a bumper crop, we're going to need rains later in the year, especially in July and August. The only crops that I could say we're probably going to be suffering is going to be some of the irrigation due to the fact that there's a shortage of water. We've restricted to half our usual water allocation. For myself, I haven't got any specialty crops, so we're good. But anybody growing potatoes or seed canola, sugar beets, they need 16 to 18 inches of rain a year or moisture with irrigation. So that's what they need to make a crop. So, and right now we're sitting at 8 inches. So we're going to need Mother Nature to do a lot more than it has already for them to have a really viable crop.
Well, we did see more light shower activity in parts of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, the moisture may remain with us for another day or so, and we could even see maybe a thunderstorm developing.
Yeah, well, it seems that these thunderstorm risks have just been being pushed back day by day by day because we were supposed to see clear skies by Friday. So now we're seeing those thunderstorm risks lingering, and it's because we haven't had them or that extra moisture that we've been sort of predicting all week. They just kind of get being pushed back. So tonight what we're seeing is that thunderstorm risk with that's actually a 60% chance of showers, and we've got some fog developing overnight. Now that fog should be lifting by the morning, dissipating there on Friday for a high of 18 degrees, and then we're still seeing a 30% chance of showers tomorrow with that risk of thunderstorms, and then hopefully clear by the weekend. And I'll be back later in the show with that 7-day forecast. Hal?
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre called out the federal government during question period on Thursday. Poilievre says after 9 years, the Liberal NDP coalition is not worth the homelessness and hunger so many Canadians are currently dealing with.
He doubled the debt, increased taxes, and caused inflation, but said it was all to fund generous programs that would end homelessness. Well, homelessness is now up 38%, and a quarter of Canadians are skipping meals because they can't afford them. That's because his greedy government is consuming everything Canadians earn. Why is the NDP and Liberals forcing Canadians to feed this morbidly obese government instead of feeding their families?
We will take no lessons from the Conservatives who purport to care about poverty and Canadians when every single time they vote against those supports, $10 a day childcare, early learning and childhood education, they're not supporting our budgetary measures to put food in school lunch boxes for 400,000 children, Mr. Speaker. It's unbelievable that they will at one hand say they support Canadians and on the other hand vote against those supports every single time.
Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller tabled legislation that would extend citizenship to some children born outside of the country. Now, back in 2009, the Conservative government changed the law so that Canadian parents who were born abroad could not pass down their citizenship unless their child was born in Canada. The bill would extend citizenship by descent beyond the first generation born outside of our country. It says that parents who were born outside of Canada will need to have spent at least 3 years in Canada before the birth or adoption of their child to pass on their Canadian citizenship.
If passed, the bill extends automatic citizenship to anyone who was born outside the country to a Canadian parent before the legislation comes into force. We also introduced amendments to respond to issues raised at parliamentary committees as well as in the courts. They will restore citizenship to those we call lost Canadians. That could be someone who was never able to become a citizen or lost citizenship because of previous and outdated legislative provisions. While the government previously brought forward changes that fixed the status of most lost Canadians, a small impacted cohort remained.
The village of Lumbee, BC in the North Okanagan is on alert following the killing of a 44-year-old woman who vanished from outside of her home last month. RCMP said a man believed to be involved in the death of Tatiana Stefanski was arrested by her body. He was released, however, with conditions, and no charges have been laid as of yet. With the suspect free, Stefanski's partner, Jason Goudreau, says he and Stefanski's children have gone into hiding.
Community safety definitely is still top of mind, but no, we haven't had really any communication from police at all. And I'm really not sure why, because of course we haven't had any communication. But you know, the community still is feeling, there's a lot of people out there that are waiting for some resolve of some sort, and we're really concerned for the family. I mean, you know, we don't know what the situation is with the person that did this, and where that leaves the children, and Jason is kind of beyond me how it would be left unchecked.
What the children and I are enduring right now, I don't wish this upon my worst enemies. Like, this is absolute hell. He's just out there walking free. We found a few temporary places and stuff, but that's hard because most people don't even want to take us in because they're scared for their own safety.
Wow. The U.S. Justice Department filed an antitrust lawsuit against Ticketmaster and its parent company, Live Nation Entertainment, accusing them of running an illegal monopoly over live events in North America, squelching competition and driving up ticket prices for fans. The lawsuit filed in federal court was being brought with 30 state and district attorneys general seeking to break up the monopoly that is hurting smaller promoters and hurting artists.
In recent years, Live Nation Ticketmaster's exorbitant fees and technological failures have been criticized by fans and artists alike. But we are not here today because Live Nation Ticketmaster's conduct is inconvenient or frustrating. We are here because, as we allege, that conduct is anti-competitive and illegal. The result is that fans pay more in fees, artists have fewer opportunities to play concerts, smaller promoters get squeezed out, and venues have fewer real choices for ticketing services. As detailed in our complaint, Live Nation suffocates its competition using a variety of tactics, from acquisitions of smaller regional promoters and venues, to threats and retaliation, to agreements with rivals designed to neutralize them.
Live Nation has said it has not broken any antitrust laws. Russian missiles killed 7 people in Kharkiv as an intense cross-border offensive by the Kremlin's larger and better equipped forces continues. Officials say more than a dozen were also injured in the attack. Russian forces have hit Ukraine's second-largest city at least 15 times since the war broke out more than 2 years ago. Ukraine's state railway company said a number of its facilities had been damaged in the attack, and many of its employees have been seriously injured. Earlier this month, Russian forces renewed their offensive in the region in an attempt to break through a weakened Ukrainian front line. There are reports that the Israel Defense Forces have launched counter-terrorism efforts inside of both Judea and Samaria. As TBN Israel's Yair Pinto reports now, the offensive is to combat alleged terrorism taking place at a refugee camp in Jenin.
Security forces, together with the IDF and the Shin Bet, launched this operation early Tuesday morning. Shortly after entering the city, the Israeli forces were met with a large barrage of gunfire from the terrorists who didn't want to be arrested. As we are filming this video, the battle is ongoing, but we can tell you that terrorists have been eliminated, but so far, no Israeli forces have been killed. This ground operation followed several days in which the Air Force launched strikes to take out senior terrorists in the city. The most important of them was Islam Hamisha, who was responsible for a series of attacks against Israeli citizens over the last few years, including May 2023, Halamish shooting attack in which Meir Tamari was murdered, and another attack in June of that same year in which another Israeli was wounded.
You know, here in southern Alberta, there's a very rich history of stories about the people who made this area what it is today. There are fun tidbits of history that we can learn about Lethbridge. Lorianne Johansson, Vice President of the Lethbridge Historical Society, shares the truth about how Lethbridge actually got its name.
Lethbridge was named after William Lethbridge. He was the president and largest shareholder of the Northwestern Coal and Navigation Company. You know how the NMAX Center is named after the sponsor, NMAX? Lethbridge is something similar to that. He got the city named after him because of his money that he invested into the company. He never actually visited Lethbridge at all, not even once.
Fascinating stuff. Make sure you catch the full interview with Lorianne Johansson from the Lethbridge Historical Society coming up in the second half of our program. Future medical students at the University of Lethbridge likely won't begin their studies until at least the fall of 2026. Now, according to the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at the U of L, that is pretty ambitious. So how far away is that vision from becoming a reality, and what steps still need to be taken before the first set of students arrive? Dr. John Doan visited the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization and spoke about the current state of health science education at the university. Doan discussed the challenges involved in starting this much-needed medical education training facility here in Lethbridge.
The challenges are enormous, to be honest, right? You know, we need the physical space that's going to welcome these learners and these instructors, so that would include some wet lab space, that would include learning space, that would include common space for their interactions, that would include clinical spaces where they can practice those clinical skills while being observed. So in parallel with all those needs, we need the expertise to instruct those students as well. So again, it's finding medical experts, people who are working now as physicians, clinicians, and also academic experts who can find a way to contribute to that program. So yeah, it's an ambitious goal that we are pointing towards. And I'm not saying that that's not realistic, but it is ambitious.
The province recently announced that it is investing more than $200 million into training rural doctors. A large portion of the funds will be invested in the University of Lethbridge to help the post-secondary develop its new medical facility. There will be a unique program being offered in Lethbridge to help younger students aged 3 through 12 recognize their creative abilities. The IBPYP program at Our Lady of the Assumption School will launch once again later this fall. Associate Principal Karen Swark explains what makes this delivery method so special.
The IBPYP stands for International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program, which is why we call it IBPYP. And it is the elementary school branch of the International Baccalaureate. So the International Baccalaureate is an international nonprofit organization that is aimed at encouraging students to learn through inquiry, through communication, and to develop students who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow globally. About half the centers are focused on different cultural activities. So they're doing some African drumming, they're making some Ukrainian dolls, that sort of thing. The other half of the centers are focused on introducing them to some of the fundamental aspects of inquiry-based learning through the PYP, exploring simultaneously some of the cultural and linguistic backgrounds of our community, as well as some of the activities that might help them to understand what our learning will look like next year.
Swark says the program is based on the recognition of the child's natural curiosity, creativity, and ability to reflect. She says it generates a stimulating and challenging learning environment to nurture the entire child and foster a lifelong love of learning. Staff and students of St. Martha's School were treated to a very special event on Thursday, a powwow featuring colorful outfits, cultural music, and lots of great dancing. Organizers say it's an event students look forward to each and every year.
Our students get so excited about our powwow every year. It's something that from the beginning of the year till now, we look forward to celebrating. Today we are celebrating our community powwow, which is an amazing way of bringing our culture into the school. Many of our students, it's their first time dancing, so we have a lot of nervous kids, but they are doing amazing. We always lead by example. So as myself, I used to dance many, many years ago when I was a child, but I stopped dancing. So this is the first time I'm actually dancing in about 22 years. So when I had my child, I took on a different role as being a mom and I stepped away from dancing. So I'm reclaiming that myself. So it's really amazing to support my students and dance beside them as they're learning and to ease their fears. I love to invite our community and all of our students to participate. We believe in sharing our culture and celebrating it for everyone. It's FNMI for all, so First Nations, Métis, and Inuit education for everyone. So in our school, we don't segregate our First Nations students in the classroom teachings from everyone else. We bring it right into their classroom so everyone gets to be a part of the learning and celebrating and experiencing the rich culture that we have here in Southern Alberta.
Organizers say the powwow really helps students connect with, celebrate, and learn more about the culture of the Indigenous community. Well, we experienced a little more moisture across much of southwestern Alberta again today. Things, however, may be drying up, but not for a couple more days. Full weather details are coming up. Many areas of Alberta have been receiving quite a bit of rain the past week or so. It has been helping our firefighters, especially near Fort McMurray. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we too have seen a little bit of moisture here in southwestern Alberta, but the rain clouds may be moving on as we make our way closer to the weekend.
Yes, Environment Canada predicting more showers tonight and tomorrow, but after that we should be seeing mainly sunny skies with some scattered clouds there. Now just keep in mind these lingering thunderstorm risks still in effect. Could see them tonight, possibly tomorrow. So 60% chance of showers this evening, 30% chance on Friday, high of 18 degrees. We don't want to see that lightning, but we definitely need the moisture, don't we? And then hopefully some sunny skies on the weekend so we can get out and do something. 17 for a high on Saturday, up to 16 on Sunday, 20 degrees on Monday with clear skies. And then look at that. Suddenly summer is arriving as we're seeing a high of 29 degrees on Tuesday and up to 31 on Wednesday. Okay, so the average high for this time of year, 19 degrees, average low, 532 was our high temperature on this day back in 2001. Record low was -3, happening back in 1960. Sunrise this morning at 5:36. We're seeing a sunset this evening 1 minute later than we did yesterday at 9:21. So now we're seeing 2 minutes longer of daylight today than we did yesterday, putting us at 15 hours, 45 minutes of daylight. Okay, a bit of a rainy one on the west coast tomorrow. Victoria seeing some showers, high of 14, 30K winds in the Wanda Fuca Strait there, 15 for a high, and Vancouver with 60% chance of showers. Mix of sun and cloud expected in Edmonton tomorrow, high of 15, and we could see some shower and a risk of a thunderstorm in Calgary tomorrow with a high of 15 degrees. Same thing for Saskatoon. Could see a 60% chance of showers, risk of thunderstorms, high of 13 there. Regina sitting at a high of 14 tomorrow with scattered clouds. Winnipeg could see a rainfall warning. Actually, they are in a rainfall warning is in effect this evening and into tomorrow. So could see up to 15 millimeters of rain tonight, 30 to 40 millimeters expected tomorrow on Friday, high of 9 degrees there. And then as we get into the central part of the country, Toronto looking at a high of 26 tomorrow, nice hot one, clear skies there, 21 for a high in Ottawa and 21 in Montreal with nice sunny skies there as well. As we get to Atlantic Canada here, Fredericton, high of 26 degrees, could see showers, mix of sun and cloud in Halifax, 25 also for a high in Charlottetown. Could see some thunderstorms and some showers tomorrow, and then up to 10 millimeters of rain expected tomorrow in St. John's with a high of 9 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The U.S. Justice Department has filed a sweeping antitrust lawsuit against Ticketmaster and its parent company, Live Nation Entertainment. It is accusing them of running an illegal monopoly over live events and driving up prices for fans. The suit seeks to break up the monopoly, which has been squeezing out smaller promoters and hurting artists. Live Nation has denied it engages in practices that violate antitrust laws. Executives at credit card companies are giving Canadians who are preparing to go on holidays abroad some much-needed advice. They say you should contact your card issuer about your trip and let them know about your travel plans. The head of risk at Visa Canada says most credit card companies detect a change in typical behavior and use algorithms to determine if a transaction may be fraudulent. It is also recommended that you activate transaction alerts to keep track of expenses and notice right away if there's any fraudulent activity. WestJet Airlines is set to introduce a new cheaper fare category for travelers willing to fly without a carry-on bag. Company officials say the new fare will be introduced within the next couple of weeks. They say the new ultra-low price offering will appeal to travelers seeking the lowest fares, but will also free up overhead bin space for other passengers. Travelers who purchase the cheapest fare will still be allowed to store a purse or a knapsack underneath the seat in front of them. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 145 points on the day to finish at 22,200. The Dow was down 605 points to 39,065. The S&P 500 was down 39 points to 5267, and the Nasdaq was down 65 points to finish at 16,736. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 70 cents to 76.87 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 19 cents to 2.66 US. Gold was down $49.58 to $2,329.26 US an ounce, and silver was down 66 cents to $30.13 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.63 per bushel, barley is at $6.46, canola is at $16.94, and corn is at $7.97 per bushel. Live cattle June contracts were down $1.30 to $181.60. Feeder cattle were down 5 cents to $250.33. Lean hogs were down 88 cents to $94.53, and the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at $72.84 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the government of Alberta announced that there will be new funding to help support us as we age. Officials say they signed a 5-year, $627 million bilateral funding agreement with the federal government. The funds will support home care and continuing care home initiatives. Be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Well, Lethbridge and southern Alberta have a fascinating, rich history to look back upon, and we perhaps don't take enough time to reflect upon it, but today's guest is going to help us do just that. Lorian Johansson is the Vice President of the Lethbridge Historical Society. Welcome to Bridge City News, Lorian. Great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I always love to talk about Lethbridge's history.
Awesome. Okay, well, with that said, maybe give our viewers a brief snapshot of what your organization is all about. It's not just Lethbridge history, right? But Southern Alberta, all of Southern Alberta?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the Lethbridge Historical Society is a chapter of the Historical Society of Alberta. Our chapter covers the Southern Alberta region, sort of from just south of Calgary down to the border. So it does encompass quite a lot of Southern Alberta, including all of the small towns. They are free to access our resources, and we do a lot of work with them as well. We do tend to focus on Lethbridge because that's where we're based, but we do also cover a lot of other things in the region.
Okay, great. Well, maybe give us an idea of what takes place at a typical meeting or gathering of the Lethbridge Historical Society.
Well, we have several different options as far as gatherings. On the fourth Tuesday of every month during September through April, we host a general meeting for our membership where we conduct a little bit of business and then we move into a presentation format. We invite guest speakers from all different walks of life come and speak to our members and guests about things that are relevant or interesting. We've had horticulture and we've had how to plant a victory garden in your front yard or backyard. We've had it was fascinating, yes, what kind of vegetables you can grow in Southern Alberta that you can then turn around and eat to be a little bit more self-sustaining and environmentally conscious. That was a really great one. We've talked about our plaques and monuments project. Anything that really would be fascinating or interesting to our membership and to the general public. So that's one of the ways. We do also conduct tours, walking tours of the city and local area. Some of them are the Downtown History and Beer Tour, which most people are familiar with. That was initiated by the LHS here. And we do some for general public. We do some for the membership. So we have a lot of tours that take place throughout the year. We have several coming up actually over the next few months. And then the other thing is to join the executive council and sit on the board with the rest of the team. So that happens on Monday. So there's several different ways to get involved.
It sounds like it. So obviously this is something people can join in. How can people maybe join up for your group?
The easiest way is to attend one of the general meetings and sign up for your membership with one of the executive that's there. We do also have a website, lethbridgehistory.org, and memberships are available through there, as well as a contact us form. So if you have questions, you can certainly submit an email request and somebody will be able to guide you through becoming a member.
Okay, so why don't we begin with the name of the city? So I think a lot of people assume the name Lethbridge stems from the famous bridge that spans the coulees, but that isn't necessarily the case now, is it?
It's not at all the case, actually. Okay. Lethbridge was named after William Lethbridge. He was the president and largest shareholder of the Northwestern Coal and Navigation Company. You know how the NMAX Center is named after the sponsor, NMAX? Lethbridge is something similar to that. He got the city named after him because of his money that he invested into the company. He never actually visited Lethbridge at all, not even once.
Oh, wow. Well, that's disappointing. So it all comes down to money, right?
Unfortunately, that's the case. Yeah. It has been for a long time.
It's a little bit more of a romantic notion to think it's about the bridge, really.
Sure.
I can see why the rumor got started.
Absolutely. It makes sense, but it's completely a coincidence that it's Lethbridge and we have a bridge.
And then we become Bridge City. Yes, I know. That's so interesting. So, I mean, speaking of the bridge, that iconic high-level bridge is often referred to as the longest in the world. And there are, of course, longer bridges elsewhere, but I believe it's still the longest of its specific type in the world. Can you maybe share a little bit about the history of that bridge?
Of course. The bridge is, in fact, the longest for its height and style in the world. Nobody has built anything that's longer and higher of the same style trestle bridge.
And that would be like a trestle bridge, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. It was announced in 1906 and completed 3 years later. It is still the largest single railway structure in Canada. It was put into place to shorten the trip to Fort Macleod. Instead of having to go down and around the river valley, the bridge was put in place so that they could just skip over the top and shave off several hours at least of their train journey. The walls on the side of the bridge, you've seen them there, they're to make sure that the trains don't get pushed off by our wind, our beautiful wind in southern
Oh
Alberta.
my gosh, that's scary.
It's a safety.
I didn't even think that's a possibility, but now that you said it,
Well, the wind can get pretty powerful down here in southern Alberta, so they put those measures in place. The construction of the bridge is actually considered a national historic event. Over 100 men worked on the construction of the bridge. There were a few deaths during the construction. Safety measures for workers were not what they are now. There is a very famous photograph of two men leaping off the last structure to be lowered into place. They were promptly fired after that. They did not die, but they were fired for their shenanigans.
Oh my gosh, I think I have seen that picture, and they're jumping
Most
basically into
people
the river,
have, yeah.
right?
But they're jumping from the piece of steel off to the side of the
yes,
bay.
where the
Yeah.
land is. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So it's not as high as we think at that point, but
No,
still.
no.
Still, safety first, gentlemen. Come on, let's not give other people ideas, right?
In the early 1900s, they didn't have fall-safe harnesses. They didn't have
There
any
was
of
no
those
such
things.
thing as safety back then, basically.
That's right.
I
Which
get
may
it.
be one of the reasons why safety harnesses and whatnot were put into place as we moved through the 19th and 20th centuries, because people did things like that. I don't know. That's just my speculation, but it makes sense.
There you go. Okay, so moving on from the bridge, we have a school named after, so we've got some other famous names here in town. So we have a school named after Nicholas Sharon and a hospital named after Sir Alexander Galt. And both were businessmen who started coal mines here. So to what degree did coal mining impact Lethbridge in the early years?
There were over 100 mines in the Lethbridge coal fields, somewhere between Picture Butte and McGrath. In 1919, we were the highest producing coal field in Canada, and it helped to determine where Lethbridge was built. It brought in industries such as Lethbridge Iron Works. It was a major employer, brought a lot of families to the area, and started other communities like Colehurst and Diamond City. It's almost impossible to quantify the importance of coal mining to our development. It was the founding reason for Lethbridge's construction here. And then as we moved out of coal mining, that's when we moved into more of an agricultural community. But we definitely started as that industrial coal mining location. That's why the city sprang up where it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, in addition to that, Southern Alberta has a rich Indigenous history. So the River Valley has a park named Indian Battle Park, where Fort Whoop-Up is located. So maybe share a brief history about that.
The Indian Battle Park is the name that was chosen by City Council in the 1960s. And it specifically refers to a battle in the fall of 1870 between the Blackfoot Nations and the Cree Nations. It was a winter camping area protected from the weather and that. And where the high level bridge is now was a very natural crossing point in the river. We do have a book about the Indian battle that went on there, several different editions. But the story of how these two nations fought over rights to the land and the ability to camp there, it's much more than I could cover in such a short time. But that's why it's named that, because our Indigenous peoples camped there and wintered there to stay safe from the elements.
Yeah, and then of course, speaking of Indigenous people, people from around the world travel to Alberta specifically to visit Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump. So for any viewers who have never heard about this or have ever been there, what is that all about?
Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump it's a national historic site. It's a provincial heritage site. and a World Heritage Site, all of which were designated through the 60s, late 60s into the early 80s. It's a place where the Indigenous peoples would drive the buffalo off the cliff in order to harvest them. It is definitely a fascinating interpretive center there. If you haven't been, I definitely recommend it. It's a very eye-opening look into how Indigenous people manage to hunt in such large capacities. And there are guides and books available online that give you a lot of the details of the history of the location. But it's one of our national heritage sites that we're very proud to be quite close to Lethbridge.
Yeah, I believe it's a UNESCO heritage site, isn't it? Yeah,
yes.
That's amazing. Okay, now, Lorian, you mentioned agriculture earlier, and of course that is a big part of southern Alberta, especially the sugar beet industry. So I believe that that also brought quite a few Japanese immigrants to our area. So maybe can you tell us a bit about that?
The sugar beet industry has been operating in Lethbridge to this day since the early 1900s. You are correct. Some Japanese immigrants moved here. They were recruited to work in the first factory in Raymond and in the beet fields. Some of these families their descendants are still in and around Lethbridge. During the Second World War, 2,500 of these Japanese Canadians were relocated here by the government to work in the beet fields. It was considered later in life, it was considered a human rights violation to uproot these families and move them here with no choice in the matter. The Canadian government did issue an official apology to the families in 1988, but those families did settle here, and some of them remain here to this day, at least parts of them. So the sugar beet industry has always been important to Lethbridge and agriculture, some for good reason, some for bad, obviously. I mean, history, we like to think of history as this happy, nostalgic style thing, but some of Canadian history is not pleasant and it's not nice. And we have to acknowledge that before we can move out of that cycle. They say history, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. So by studying history and the real, honest, nitty-gritty facts about it, perhaps we can avoid those sorts of things as we grow and develop as a society.
Yeah, the more you learn about it, the more you can avoid it. And yeah, exactly. It's fascinating though, Lorian. And moving on from there, Lethbridge and area are also known for its history of irrigation canals. Much of that was put in place by our Mormon community. So that of course, has really influenced the culture of southern Alberta, hasn't it?
It has. Lethbridge and southern Alberta, heavily Mormon. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. They've brought a lot and contributed a lot. The agreement was made by Alexander Galt with the LDS Church so that their settlers would build canals, and then they received land and money as payment for their work. They were brought in because they came from Utah originally, where they were experts in dryland farming and the different skills required. And it was able to transform the area around Lethbridge to make more crops possible because we needed high dollar value crops to be able to be grown here. So that it was sort of they got to move to somewhere new and get land and money for it. We got the benefit of their dryland farming knowledge and irrigation.
I am learning so much here. It's fascinating.
Lethbridge is so rich in history and how all of these things that we see now still. We drive over irrigation canals and we see the sugar beet factories, and we go down to the park and we see the mine sites of 6 and 8, Galt Mine 6 and 8, that are still, the ruins are still there. And Lethbridge exists because these things were brought in and this area of the world was made hospitable.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's awesome. Thanks so much again for being with us today. It looks like we're out of time, but we really appreciate having you on here, Lorian.
Well, thank you so much. I would just like to mention that we do have several members only tours coming up in April, June, and October. So if you'd like to get involved with the bars and taverns or the murder mysteries of Lethbridge's past, please go on our website, get a membership, and then those tours will be open for our members. And we welcome members of the public to our general meetings, again, the fourth Tuesday of every month, usually at the community room in the public library.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Lorian. Very, very interesting. Great to have you on today.
Thank you again for the invitation.
Absolutely. Lorian Johansson is the Vice President of the Lethbridge Historical Society. Well, growing up a generation ago was very different than it is for kids today. And certainly social media has had both a positive and negative impact on our kids. We see too many young people who have become couch potatoes or even game chair potatoes, as I say, and don't know how to communicate without a device. But we're also seeing kids who are becoming world changers. So how can we influence our children to be in that latter camp? Well, joining us to discuss this is Dr. Tim Elmore. He's the author of 35 books, including his newest release. It's the best-selling, he's the best-selling author of I Can't Wait, 52 Stories of Kids Who Changed Their World That You Can Read Together. He's also the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders and has spoken to 500,000 business leaders, universities, athletes, and nonprofits. Wow. He joins me now from Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Elmore, welcome back to Bridge City News. You are a busy, busy guy.
Well, you're busy as well, but yeah, I'm not getting bored these days, that's for sure.
Right. Okay. So you do a lot, but let's talk about your latest book. So what inspired you to write I Can't Wait? Is this strictly for children?
No, not at all. In fact, it's something kids can benefit from, but I really thought about families, maybe even teachers in a classroom, maybe even a coach on a field, but it's 52 stories, so one a week for a whole year that you can begin to talk about kids with your kids who did something amazing to solve problems and serve people. But I thought because it's harder and harder for moms and dads to connect with their kids at 13 years old, let's say, and the kids, as you mentioned, Jeanette, are often very much at home with a screen, but not face to face with another person. I thought, what if we told redemptive stories, had a discussion, a conversation that might inspire your kid on that sofa, maybe, to get up and do something themselves with their gifts. So that's my goal. Yeah.
No, definitely. The sofas, the gaming chairs, let's get those kids out there. So considering your years of experience in developing and equipping leaders, so how would you say the current generation of children differs these days from previous generations?
Well, one obvious one is they have a very high sense of agency. And what I mean by that is they feel very empowered, probably by a smartphone. I feel like I know it all and I'm 12, that sort of thing. And sometimes they do, it's amazing. But along with that high sense of agency, Jeanette, there's a high sense of anxiety. They're often overwhelmed with all that they consume on that smartphone. So it's oxymoronic, high agency, high anxiety. Yeah, both were deepened by smartphones. But here's the good news. It's not all negative. Sometimes a kid can get on a screen or the internet and they find a problem in their own community that they could do something about. So let me tell you one of the stories that just illustrates what I'm saying.
Okay.
Virgil, a few years ago, was in the 8th grade, 13 years old. He was playing video games with his friend Kashan late one night, when both boys heard a loud clap outside the window. Now, they're in the same apartment complex, but not the same apartment. That's how we can play video games these days.
Right.
But they heard this loud noise. They looked out the front window, and they saw that a storm was coming in. But they both assumed it wasn't that bad. Well, they were wrong. It was Hurricane Harvey. Remember that about 5 or 6 years ago? Well, before he knew it, young Virgil, 8th grade, was up to his knees in water. The apartment was flooding.
Wow.
I love the fact, though, how Virgil responded. He didn't wait for an adult to do something. Didn't wait for permission from an adult to do something. He grabbed his phone, he grabbed his mother, and he grabbed his older sister, and he ran them upstairs to get to a higher floor away from the rising waters. And to me, that would be an act of heroism, but it didn't stop there. When he gets upstairs, he gets a phone call from Kashan, his buddy, who says, Verge, we're drowning over here. We need help. Well, once again, Virgil springs into action. He didn't wait for an adult. He didn't wait for permission. Virgil runs right back downstairs to his flooding apartment, grabs an air mattress that he slept on at night, and he used it as a raft. And he paddled over to Kashan's apartment, and he saved Kashan and his whole family, back and forth, back and forth.
Oh.
Act of heroism number 2. But Jeanette, it didn't stop there.
Okay.
As he's paddling back and forth, you can imagine he's hearing the cries for help from other people in the apartment.
Yeah.
He spends the next several hours paddling back and forth, helping people. According to the police report the next day, Virgil Smith saved 17 lives that night.
Wow.
Yeah, he got an award in his city for his act of heroism, and his mother was praised for raising such a fine, brave young man.
Wow, talk
Well,
about
I love
thinking.
stories like
Yeah,
that.
and he's just
Yeah.
thinking on his feet too.
That's right. And I think kids in Generation Z and the Alpha generation are more apt to do this today. They have learned about something. I heard one senior in high school say, "My teachers are obsolete." And what he meant by that was that wasn't being rude. He just thought, yeah, ouch. But he was simply saying, I think I can look up anything you're saying. So we need to empower this generation of kids. They don't need us for information. They need us for interpretation. And Virgil does this incredible thing at 8th grade that I don't think I would have done when I was 40. So anyway, I'll stop there.
That's crazy. And it's true. You said something interesting there about you can look up anything. They just have to be careful about what they're looking up and what sources they're going to, because everything is out there. So Virgil Smith sounds amazing. He's one of the young people that we meet in the book. Anyone else that we can look forward to reading about?
Well, let me do a couple of quick ones that just might be fun for your listeners and viewers. Jimmy grew up in the 20th century, so a few decades ago. And he was an odd little boy. He wasn't like the rest of the boys in the neighborhood. He didn't go out and play ball like the other boys were doing. And at first, his mom and dad said, you need to get out there. You need to get out there. But they were noticing that he loved just playing in his room. Now get this, with his socks. Yes. So they watched him, and he was making them have personalities. And you know what mom and dad decided to do with Jimmy? They thought, well, you know what? He's got an imagination. Let's just get him more socks. Well, Jimmy became the man that you and I know as Jim Henson, created the Muppet.
Oh, okay.
And
So this
so he
goes
made
way back.
Yes, it does. But I love the fact that his mom and dad didn't say, you need to be like everybody else. They said, we're going to fan your gifts into
Stop
flame.
playing with your socks.
Yeah, exactly. Which maybe what I would have said.
Right. But
the
look what
point
it bred
was,
into.
yes. So he creates this industry. So that's another one. I love the story of Anne, though. Anne was a teenager and still is, but a few years ago, she was on Facebook with her pal who lived in the Philippines. They're interacting, and Anne says, how you doing in school? Her friend says, well, not so good. I'm flunking out. Well, Anne said, flunking out? You're smarter than I am. How can that be? And Anne found out that her friend was failing because her house had no electricity. So when the sun went down, she couldn't do her homework. Well, Anne loved science. She had a science fair coming up, and she thought, I'm going to help my friend and submit a project. Anne invented a flashlight that's powered by the body heat from your hand, needs no batteries. And she created this. It actually works. She sent it over to her friend to help her friend, but she also won this incredible award for the science fair. She's now gone on to college, but I'm thinking, I don't think I would have even thought to do that. So listeners, I know that most of what we hear about kids is negative. They're getting into trouble and their anxiety attacks. But folks, there's some great things going on, and I think we need to tell these stories to inspire our kids whenever we can.
Absolutely. So, how can we as parents inspire our kids to have long-term vision?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with conversations. I don't know what your experience is, but I think parents today are they feel this generation gap with their screenager and then them. But I'm thinking, what if dinner time once a week? What if bedtime? What if drive time? You just say, let's read one of those stories. And there's 3 discussion questions at the end of each story that you could talk over. And then there's even a link to a video you can watch about Virgil or Anne or Jimmy or whatever. But my hope is these narratives change inside their head, that the world can be changed by someone under 40, that sort of thing. So that's the beginning step. I think we begin that change by telling the right stories, not just kids today,
Yeah.
which is often what we do.
Right. Yeah.
I think those stories begin to reframe what we're thinking about, what we can do for God in our world today. Yeah.
So, Dr. Tim, how can a parent maybe recognize leadership potential in a child?
Yeah, it's a great question and probably one that deserves an hour. Let me see if I can do it justice in 2 minutes. It's my belief that the world is full of 2 kinds of leaders, and every kid in the world fits into one of these 2 kinds. They're either a habitual leader or a situational leader.
Okay, I was going to ask, are we
So
born with it or can you teach it?
yeah, so it's a little of both. So the habitual leaders are those rare kids that are just natural born leaders. Whatever team they're on, whatever group they're in, they tend to take over. For 20 years, I worked for Dr. John Maxwell. I think John is a habitual leader. I think he came out of the womb telling the doctors and nurses what to do in the maternity ward. But I think that's maybe 1 out of 10. The other 9 out of 10 are what I call situational leaders. That's what I am. And we're the people that would look in the mirror in the morning and go, I'm not really a great leader, but put us in the right situation, one that matches our gifts, our passions, our strengths. In that one zone, I kind of know what to do. I've never taken a class on it, but I'm comfortable. I'm confident. I have influence. We've all seen that little boy, perhaps that's a wallflower. Then we put him on the soundboard. He's come alive. What's happened here? So I think the job of us as caring adults is to help those kids find their situation. They don't even need a badge to lead. They just have influence. And that's what we're trying to build, a world of influencers that know how to solve problems and serve people.
Yeah.
That's our goal.
Yeah. So how can parents, maybe and adults, use your book to motivate young people to harness their creativity? It's not always easy.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, this is not a simple thing. Conversations are messy. Sometimes kids don't want to talk. But my hope for listeners and viewers today is for the caring adults, whether you're a teacher, coach, parent, to get intentional this year. Let's get intentional. And by that, I simply mean let's put on the calendar. Once a week, we're going to tell a story. We're going to read a story. We're going to talk about it. We'll go back to life as normal the other days, but let's be intentional and redemptive at least once a week. I think we'll be surprised. Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you a story. We beta tested this book with several families here in the Atlanta area where I live. One little boy and girl, 12 and 10 years old, the family read one of the stories together at dinner time. The little girl said, "Give me that book," after they were done with one story. She read the rest of the stories over the weekend, started writing down her answers to the questions in the story, and now she's writing her own book. She's 11 now. And so I'm just thinking, we can't plan the outcomes, but we can plan the inputs. What do? Well, we have a dinner. We have bedtime. If you're still tucking your kids in, have a bedtime. Once a week, we're going to do more than just tuck you in. We're going to talk about a story. So I know it's a simple step, probably deserves a better answer, Jeanette, but that's where I would start. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you mentioned she filled out all the questions. Your book does feature a question at the end of each short chapter. So why does it do this? Is it just to build that interaction to get the kids thinking?
Yeah, my goal is to start conversations. And I think you're a 99% chance of at least having a conversation. And then we watch what happens. Maybe a month later, that kid is on their school campus and they see another kid that's lonely or they see a need. And suddenly this story pops in their mind from Lucy or Anne or Jimmy or whatever. And they begin to take action instead of just sitting still and saying, what can I do about that? So, yeah, I really believe there are situational leaders in every one of our kids, if not natural leaders. And I think we don't see it that way. often just think, well, I just want my kids to graduate, or I just want my kids to stay out of trouble, or I just want my kids to make good grades. That's all good.
Barely
But there's
squeak by.
something more. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Right.
Just get by.
We're almost out of time, but really quick, how did you decide which kids to feature in your book? That must have been so hard.
Oh, it was. And so I'm working on version 2 right now. But these 52 stories I picked, I wanted some from history to connect kids to the past, and then some from today. I wanted boys and girls, so there's equal number stories of boys and girls. I wanted different ethnicities, so there's brown, black, white, because I wanted them to say, we've all got something to learn, we've all got something to teach. So that's how I kind of chose, and it was hard, but I just wanted everybody to find themselves in the book.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us today, Dr. Elmore. It was great having you on today and hearing about these young people that are just so amazing.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Dr. Tim Elmore is the founder of Growing Leaders and is the best-selling author of I Can't Wait, 52 Stories of Kids Who Changed Their World that you can read together. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.